For nearly 4 years, he has been Washington's man in Canada. Last month, he announced the end of his tenure as the 29th American Ambassador to Canada, and the man himself, David Jacobson, joins us now for more on his time north of the border. Nice to have you here again.
It's always great to be here, Steve.
Well, I do want to talk, obviously, about your time here as the ambassador from the United States, but I thought just before we did that, we should remember one of the guys who had the job before you. Yeah. Paul Cellucci was an appointee of George W. Bush, and he sat in that chair where you are not that long ago. Passed away, of course, very recently from ALS, a terrible way to go. And I just thought we'd play a clip of him and then chat a bit about him before we go on. Roll tape, please.
The election and the fact that we've elected a black American as the President of the United States shows how far. It's vivid evidence of how far we've come to sweep away some of the bigotry that used to permeate our land.
Love that Boston accent on Paul Cellucci.
It is.
That was great. I don't imagine you knew him well, but I imagine there's lots of talk around the shop about him.
Yeah, and I met him. By the time I met him, he had this very difficult, terrible disease, and he was already ill. But he loved his time here. He was here for a long time, and he was here at a difficult time. He was the ambassador on September 11th. That was a tough time for all Americans. There were all kinds of issues that it presented, and he acquitted himself well, and I'm proud to stand in his shoes, at least for a few more weeks.
And we are happy to remember him at this moment. Okay, let's talk about, I want to start with this. I don't know how much about Canada you knew before you got the job, but you surely know a heck of a lot more now that you've had it for almost 4 years. Can you compare you 4 years ago with you today on your knowledge of this place?
Yeah, 4 years ago I'd give myself about a D minus, and today, at least a B plus, let's put it that way. Steve, I have spent 4 years traveling this beautiful country. I probably spent at least half my time outside of Ottawa. I went to all 10 provinces in the first 2 months. I promised I was going to do that. I didn't even know what that meant when I promised it, but we spent a lot of time, and I really haven't slowed down. It is a beautiful country. It is a diverse country. I have, I think, learned an awful lot, not just about the country, but about the people. And it's how the people have learned about me, and it has just, of all the parts of the experience, and every bit of it has been great. Every day has been great. But I think the thing I will remember the most is my travels around Canada.
I wonder what's the most remote place you visited, because of course in your job you get to go places that probably 99% of Canadians have never been to.
That's easy. I went to Alert. Alert is the most northerly inhabited place on Earth. It is 400 miles, I guess about 1,000 kilometers, 900 kilometers from the North Pole.
What month did you go in?
I was there in March. It was cold. It was very cold. And you know how, Steve, everybody talks about, oh, I've been to the end of the earth? I've been to the end of the earth, so that's the most remote.
Bad staff work, though, Ambassador. I would think June or July is a better time to go to Alert, isn't it?
I haven't forgiven him.
No kidding. What impressions, I know this is probably a bit difficult to narrow down, but an impression of the country that would have been new to you in your job that you think will stay with you forever?
Well, I knew that Canada was full of good people. It is a kind country. It is something that has been reinforced every day, but that wasn't so new. What I think was new to me was, having lived in Canada for 4 years, is the importance of the difference in the historical experience of the United States and Canada, and how that impacts on our governments, on our culture, on our everyday way of life. And I oftentimes say that in the 4 years I've been here, I have learned a great deal about Canada. I went from D minus to B plus. But I've probably learned more about the United States during those 4 years.
How
because,
so?
well, I look back on some of the things that I just took for granted, I never thought about. And I look at them in a little bit different light. I look at our system of government and the way it was structured and why it was structured the way it was after a revolution. And I understood our system of government. I've studied it, I've taught it, but I never understood it as emotionally as I have since I've been here in Canada. And there are things in both directions. My experiences as an American and how I view things in Canada, how I view, quite frankly, what I've seen over the last 4 years is a change when they play "O Canada" and how many people sing when it goes on. A lot more people sing today than did 4 years ago.
That's an interesting observation, because we haven't in the past thumped our chests patriotically in the way that I think Americans love to do.
You know, and this is probably dangerous ground, but you know, I'm only here for a few more weeks, so what the heck? But I never thought ever that Canadians were not as patriotic. They did not love their country as much as Americans do. They do. But they were not as nationalistic, these symbols of nationalism, singing the national anthem, putting your hand over your heart during the Star-Spangled Banner, waving the flag. But there has been a change, and I think there are probably, I've seen a number of reasons for that. Probably the biggest reason is you guys have done really well over the last 4 years at a time when we did a little bit less well, and it probably made people feel more self-confident. It may sound silly, but I think the Olympic experience in Vancouver has stuck with Canadians. I was there for most of it, and it was an extraordinary experience, except for that hockey game.
I thought that went rather well, actually.
Not so good, not so good. but you know, I have seen that change over the 4 years, and you know, there's so many things like that, little things. But you become very attuned to them when you've come from someplace else, and I have come to truly respect your values and your people. It is, as I said, it's a country full of really good people.
Let me follow up on that, because when you go back to the States, you will no doubt at various times be asked, so what are Canadians really like? And I want to know, on a list of adjectives that you will end up using to describe the typical Canadian, what's going to be on that list?
I think probably the first word that would come to mind for me is kind. They are, you know, these are generalizations, and obviously there are some people who aren't, but by and large, as a people, you are a kind people. A word that also comes to mind is cohesive, that it is a cohesive society. I know sometimes, you know, journalists in Canada don't always look at it that way, but as compared to the United States, it is much more so.
Really? Because Canadians would say we are less cohesive now. Many, I think, would say we're less now than at any time in the last 50 years.
Well, you're still ahead of us on the cohesion factor. That I think that Canadians care more for one another. And again, it's a generalization, but you care a lot for one another. I think that you have fewer people at some of the extremes that we have. And it is both really good and it's sometimes a challenge. And it's really good in the United States sometimes to have the Steve Jobses at the extremes, and sometimes it's a challenge.
Most politicians in this country at one time or another have beat the drum of anti-Americanism to get votes, because it usually works. How much anti-Americanism have you run into up here?
Next to none. And you know, that may be the biggest surprise. Before I came here, I heard a lot about that. And I had heard from some of my predecessors, I had heard from people in Washington, I had heard from friends. You know, you're going to hear about, you know, they're going to dump all over the United States, and that's good for them, and it makes them feel good. And I don't know exactly the reason why, although I suspect the vast bulk of it is Barack Obama. But I have felt almost none of it. I believe that, I know I respect the Canadian people. I think the American people respect the Canadian people. I think for some of the reasons I talked about earlier, why Canadians feel better about themselves. You know, I won't say it's never happened, but the incidence of it, I could probably count on one hand.
Well, I'm going to push back on that a little bit, because you're right. I think you're a friend of Barack Obama's. You got appointed by Barack Obama. You weren't here during the George W. Bush years, and I got a feeling if you were, you'd have seen more of it.
Well,
fair point?
And I do think that's right. And you know, the question is, what have I seen? And what I've seen is that there is a real affinity between the Canadian people, the American people. That probably always exists, but there's just comfort that Canadians have now with the United States, and I think you understand that we like you and we respect you.
Let me do a little just sort of background into where you're at right now, because I don't know how these things work. The term expires. Do you and the president at some point have a conversation about whether you're coming home or whether you want another term?
There are plenty of people lined up to get this job. Trust me, this is the best job in the United States government. So the president will not have any trouble finding a successor. I serve at the pleasure of the president. There is no fixed term, but the tradition is that after a president is reelected, he will find new ambassadors all over the world, and they're in the process of doing that. I will tell you, I had to submit a letter of resignation to the President of the United States. And as I sat at my desk with the letter in front of me and the pen in my hand, the tears welled up in my eye.
No kidding.
It's a tough thing. Every single day has been great. It is time to move on. It is time to go do other things. But I will miss this. I will think longingly about it for the rest of my days.
Surely you missed Chicago as well, though, when you were up here.
I did miss Chicago. I missed my friends. I missed the Blackhawks. I missed the Cubs. I missed the pizza.
You missed the Cubs?
I missed the Cubs. I love the Cubs. Don't get me started.
Okay,
here.
so you're not perfect, obviously.
I'm here on my best behavior. Don't get carried away. But yeah, of course I did, and I have friends and I have family. And my wife Julie and I are excited to go back to Chicago. That part will be great. And I guess we're very, very lucky that we love what we're doing and we're excited about the next thing. But this has been something special. You know, somebody said, oh, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. It's not a once-in-a-lifetime experience. It's a once-in-a-several million lifetimes experience. And I was just incredibly fortunate to have had it.
I want to talk about this notion of history as biography with you for a bit, because I wonder whether the linkages, the relationship between Canada and the United States right now is just so intertwined, so interwoven, that it almost doesn't matter who's the president, who's the prime minister, who's the ambassador here, who our ambassador is down there. There's just so much mutual interest for us to get along now that it's hard to screw it up. Is that your view?
If I can be successful, it's hard to screw up. Okay, I'll start there. But I do agree with you, Steve, that this isn't about me, and it is not about my successor, and it's probably not even about the president and Stephen Harper. That there is a fundamental tie between the Canadian people and the American people. While we are not the same, while there are differences, we talked about it a little bit, that at its core we share so much. And I think everybody gets that. And yeah, at the margins, we have what most countries would view as very high-class problems. I would venture to say that pretty much any other country in the world would wish to have the problems that Canada and the United States have with one another. These are, in the scheme of things, not the kinds of monumental issues that so many countries face with their neighbors. And that's going to go on. It went on before I was here, and it'll go on long after I was here. And that what we can do is we can affect this stuff at the margins.
Can you give because I suspect a lot of people don't know exactly what you do during the course of your day, and obviously, writ large, it is to advocate for your country up here. But give me an example, if you can, of a policy issue that you worked on where you thought the outcome was an unambiguous win for America, an unambiguous win for Canada. At the end of the day, everybody was happy.
Well, you know, I can probably come up with a lot of them for starters, and I'll give you an example, but fundamentally, that's what the relationship is all about. This has to be a win-win. That's what diplomacy is about at its best. And I would like to think that when I dealt with my Canadian counterparts, I dealt with them as my colleagues, as my equals, and that we were looking for a success for both of us. My counterpart, the Canadian ambassador to the United States, Gary Dewar, and I talk constantly. And that's the way we approach each other. That's the way I approach the foreign minister, the defense minister, the prime minister. That's how we do it. A couple of examples. I think the Beyond the Border effort. This is something that is designed to make it easier for honest people and safe goods to move back and forth across the border more expeditiously while making all of us safer. Doesn't matter whether you're an American or a Canadian. The new bridge over the Detroit River. Doesn't matter which side of the river you live on, which side of the river you work on, it's better for all of us.
Well, the guy who owns the Ambassador Bridge didn't like the idea too much.
Not so good for him, but for everybody else in the region, it's pretty good. There are just, that's the way we did things. That's the way we do everything. And it is why the relationship is different in kind from the relationships that we have with an awful lot of other countries in the world.
And yet, there are times when America, for reasons it believes are right and just, comes up with a new policy that is designed to help America, and it ensnares Canada in an international trap. And then Canada has to get on its lobbying horse and say, yeah, but we really should have an exemption to this because of X, Y, and Z. And you'll grant that there are times when America seems to take Canada for granted and may not have Canada in its sights as well as it should. Fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, look,
why does
the
that still
United
happen?
States, well, for one thing, the United States has to worry about problems everywhere in the world, and sometimes our attention gets distracted more than it should. But fundamentally, I think Americans understand there is nobody who is a better friend of the United States than Canada. But to your broader point, that from time to time things come up that we don't agree upon, that's inevitable. That it's probably good. That Canada is a sovereign nation, the United States is a sovereign nation. Our interests do not always exactly coincide, and therefore there are going to be differences. And that's something that I think we understand and that we live with. And the real secret here is that when those things do come up, that first of all, we talk about them, we try to resolve them in a mature way to the mutual benefit of everyone. And sometimes when we can't, and there are a handful of instances where we can't, we understand that it does not destroy the rest of the relationship, the other 99% that is really good.
Okay, speaking of secrets, I want you to dish on something here, okay?
I'll do my best.
I want you, because as you just said, you've got a few weeks to go, so what the heck?
Yeah.
I want you to give us an example of
Is
a
the
time.
camera going?
Give us an example of a time when you were in a dispute with your Canadian colleagues and you actually thought they were right and you were wrong, but your job was to advocate for America, even though you thought they were right.
I'll tell you a story about this, okay? Maybe if I change the subject. But there is a story, it is perhaps apocryphal, but the Secretary of State of the United States in his or her office has an enormous globe. And the Secretary had invited a soon-to-be ambassador before he or she went away and said to the ambassador, show me on the globe where your country is. And the ambassador turned the globe and pointed to the country that he was going to. And the Secretary turned it back to the United States and said, this is your country and don't ever forget it. And that's an important lesson, that my country is the United States. I am not an independent actor here. My job is to be the personal representative of the President of the United States. When I say that, I get choked up. But that's my job. And that I have two roles, in going back to something you said earlier. One role is to try to explain Washington and the United States to the Canadian people. And the other role is to try to understand Canada and the nuance of Canada as best I can so that I can explain it back in the United States. And that Gary Doer and I are kind of the buffer between the two. And there are times when I don't, there has been no president in the history of presidents that I have agreed with 100% of the time. If I was the president, I probably wouldn't agree with myself 100% of the time. But I cannot ever waver from the view that it is not up to me to decide all these things. I have a lot of latitude in a lot of things, but fundamentally, my job is to project the views of Barack Obama and the Obama administration here in Canada, and to work with the Canadian government with the Obama administration.
I do appreciate that, but there must be times when the head hits the pillow at night and you say to yourself, we're actually not in the right on this one.
Well, there probably have been, and I'm not going to
And
tell you.
that's the secret you need to reveal right now.
I think I still got a couple of more weeks, and I'd like to serve them out in half. But you know what, Steve? In more seriously, I don't have a monopoly on wisdom. You know, none of us do, and that. You know, there are times when I have disagreed with policies of my government now and in the past.
Like what?
Times. And one of the things that I do, and fortunately, I'm in a position where I have the ability to influence those policies. And so, more than on one occasion, and it's not so much that we necessarily ended up with the wrong policy, but somebody had some great idea, and I explained to them that maybe it wasn't such a hot idea. I will give you one, and because it worked out right.
Because I've asked 3 times.
Well, yeah, but I'll give you one. There have been proposals from time to time that when ships come in Vancouver and then the goods go by rail across the United States and then come down into the United States, that somehow or another we ought to impose some sort of tax when the goods come into the United States to make up for a tax which we charge in Seattle and that they don't have to pay in Vancouver. You know, that some people came up with that idea. I thought it was a bad idea. I thought it was a very bad idea, and that sort of thing is just going to result in Canadians A, getting mad, and probably B, retaliating. And I explained that. It isn't, you know, oh, you know, you're wrong and I'm going to go to sleep and live with it. But my job was to explain why it was wrong. And ultimately, we carried the day. Now, is that always the case, that when I disagree, we carry the day? I wish that I could say that's always the case. It's probably not. You know, you win some, you lose some. I think I've won more than I've lost. But that's the way the process works.
Let me ask you a bit about your boss here, okay?
He's a good man.
The polls suggested that if the 2012 presidential election had happened in Canada, instead of winning with 51.1% of the votes over Mitt Romney, as Barack Obama did, he'd have got 80% of the votes up here. Do you wish Americans loved him as much as we apparently do?
Oh, no question about that. I wish he'd get 100% of the vote. And I think he's entitled to 100% of the vote. Make no mistake about that.
Well, no, you don't. No, you don't.
But
Saddam Hussein used to get 100%. You don't want that.
Okay, I'll settle for the 80. But look, Canadians really like the president. I think people around the world, as a general matter, like the president. The polling numbers internationally are really quite high. He is a very likable guy.
The place he's actually least popular is in his own country, where half the people don't like him.
And you know, I get asked about this a lot, and I analogize it to Pierre Trudeau. In the United States, I don't have the figures, but I'm sure that just from my own recollection, that if they had done polls about Pierre Trudeau's popularity in his day, they would have been in the 70, 80, 90%. He was a very colorful figure. He was a very likable figure. And what we saw was all the good stuff, the happy stuff. And what we didn't see were the political fights and the disagreements over policy and those things. And I think that's a part of it. But you know, the full reason as to why I'll let the 80 or 90% of the Canadians who support him to tell you. But the short answer is, I wish they could all vote in the American elections.
I don't want to take anything away from the president, because he did achieve something quite historic in winning, never mind election the first time, but re-election as well.
In the face of a dismal economy.
Face of a dismal economy, and I'm trying to think of the last American president that won re-election with more than 51% of the votes. Last Democrat might have been FDR. I mean, you got to go way back. I think the last president was Ike, and the last Democrat was FDR. So he clearly has his achievements that will go into the history books. Mm-hmm. Having said that, and I know this may be Washington sport, but he had to retreat with his tail between his legs on gun control, and there have been numerous other things where he has really tried to make the case and been sent back to his corner, kind of bloodied and beaten.
Well, he's had some wins and he's had some losses. The one thing that I'm not going to do as the United States ambassador is get involved, at least for another 3 weeks, in the partisan politics that's going on in the United States. It has been very rough over the last 4 years. And, I am the ambassador for all the American people. I'm the ambassador for Republicans. I'm the ambassador for Democrats. If you ask folks on the other side, everybody knows where my allegiances lie, but if you ask folks on the other side, they'll have good and valid reasons. I think they believe they're doing what's in the best interest of the American people. The president disagrees. Whether or not I agree this week isn't important. A month from now, I may have different views. But the one thing I can say is it has been very, very tough sledding for the president to get things through this Congress. And the fact that, we have a system that was designed from day one to make it inefficient. That's what it was about. It was designed that way so that no one person would get too much authority, too much power. And this inefficiency has been turned into an art form by some of late. And I don't think that's good for the American people. But our history is that we go through long periods of this. We go through long periods of deadlock. This has happened over and over and over again. And then something happens in our country. Sometimes it's a war, sometimes it's an economic problem, sometimes it's something else. But something happens, and then for usually a very short period of time, a couple of years, there is enormous progress. And then we revert to form. And that's the way our system was set up. Is it perfect? Of course not. But it has served us very, very well for 238 years. And I don't see any reason why it will not continue to serve us well. Frustrating as it may be, the United States, people have not done well in betting against the United States for a long, long time. And if there is one thing that I believe from the bottom of my heart, it is that we are the most resilient country in the world. We have been through some difficult times over the last 4 or 5 years. You are seeing the economy start doing quite well, not as well as we'd all like, but quite well. Certainly compared to global standards. And I would dare say 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, people are going to look back at the naysayers today and laugh at them.
Just in our last 30 seconds here, what are you going to do now?
Well, we're going back to Chicago. I am taking a couple of months off to get some sleep and eat right and get some exercise. 3 things I haven't done in a long time.
I bet you're the same weight today as when you got the job.
Pathetically,
I think you are.
Pathetically, that's true.
Yeah.
But after that, I am going to start a new job in Chicago, but it's going to bring me up here a lot. And one of the things that I am really looking forward to is maintaining my friendships up here, the relationships I've developed up here. The thing I will miss the most are the people of Canada, and I will never forget the kindness that they've exhibited to me, and I hope that they are as good and as kind and as supportive and as helpful to my successor as they've been to me.
Do you know who that successor will be?
It's up to the president to nominate somebody. He hasn't done that yet.
Does he ask your advice?
I'm not going to talk about that, but I will say that I expect that someone will be nominated quite soon.
Gotcha. Well, we've always appreciated your visits to us here at TVO, Ambassador Jacobson, and we wish you well with your future endeavors in the city which no longer is the 4th largest city in North America because Toronto has passed it.
Well, but it is soon going to be the home of the Stanley Cup champions. So
we'll see about that. We'll see about that. Thanks so much.
It's always great, Steve, to see you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.